Meanwhile, outside the gates, in the front of the border fortress of Damaniel, Kania stands proudly with a smile. She asks her brother whether she should go ahead and destroy the gate, and our protagonist give her the thumbs up. She completely annihilates the gate, and Damaniel soldiers try to stop her, but she deals with them quite easily. She feels like she can handle this alone, but her soldiers rush in after her anyway and attacks the rest of the soldiers. As expected, a swordmaster is the best for breaking through gates. Simultaneously, attacks were coming from the Ernesian kingdom to both the Mirman's empire and the Archduchy of Cheapen. The king of Ernesia was furious, and rightly so, for this war had claimed many lives. It was time to make the pay. Their targets were the capitals of the Three Kingdom Alliance. Not only had they claimed their border, but they also claimed the borders of the enemy. Sena and Asha could hardly believe that they were once struggling with this battle. Our brilliant protagonist walks in all relaxed, saying how the enemy leaders must be in utter despair. Asha then asks after Kania. Well, Kania was being worshipped and glorified by her fellow soldiers. They try to ask her about the secrets to her strength, but she could only tell them to eat and train. Back to our prince and his two personal guards, he tells them that she was busy, so he left her be. Asha asks whether they should continuing advancing. He agrees, but at a slower pace. With a wicked grin, our protagonist reveals that the plan was to take over the enemy's land bit by bit. Tormenting them was his speciality. In about 3 years they'd own about 20% of the enemy's lands, and in 5 years, the enemy will completely collapse, although most people will starve to death before that. By controlling the trade, Ernersia will slowly deplete the enemy's finances and push them into isolation. This would lead to starvation, poverty, fear, and civil unrest. Externally they'd be resisting, but internally they'd be fighting each other. Asha begins to feel sorry for them, but the prince tells her not to, for this was what the enemy had planned to do to them. If they weren't ready for the consequences, they should have never started the war. Unless they surrender, the kingdom of Ernersia will respond so harshly, it'd be remembered throughout history. At least that's what his father, the king, said in his letter. He is very angry. Sena says that war is terrifying, and Asha agrees, but the prince tells them not to worry, as all these would only happen if the enemy refuses to surrender, which they should if they have common sense. In the meantime, they just have to wait and see. Back at the Mirman Empire, the emperor absolutely refuses to surrender. His pride won't let him, for never once have they ever surrendered in the past. His council pleads with him, saying that continuing would only lead to more starvation and the death of innocent citizens. That must be more disgraceful than tarnishing their history. They had lost, and surrendering was the only way to spare the people from more suffering. The king understood this, but still couldn't budge. He believed that the king of Ernersia would not just let this go, even after they'd surrendered. They had openly declared war on his nation and cost him the lives of his people. So how could he? The king declares that they must fight back with every ounce of strength they have left. The Three Territories Alliance eventually chooses to fight with their remaining strength rather than surrender. And our boy is completely disgusted at the foolishness of his enemies. If they had chosen to surrender, he could have negotiated a peaceful resolution. How could they think that they could still win? The fight isn't even worth watching anymore at this point. As expected, the enemy's last-ditch attack ends in failure. They lose their morale, and repeated losses shatter their spirits. They receive a letter from the Kingdom of Ernesia, ordering them to stand down and surrender, so that they could be shown mercy. The king has no choice as he had completely lost. Soon, Ernesia receives their letter of surrender. Our protagonist is overjoyed. He could finally go home. It reminds him of when he got to go home after military service in one of his past lives. He is so done with military battles, those fools at the Three Territories Alliance. He prays he never sees them in his lifetime again. Asha tells him to calm down. Our prince and his troops are finally ordered to return home. Even the harsh weather and snow back in Fahilia is weirdly welcoming. He'd have to order them to clear the snow, for it is time to get back to his sweet, mundane life. At the palace, in the council room, the king and his council have just concluded post-war matters. It is time to decide rewards to those who protected the Bothers. Gold and slaves would be granted to the Mangraves, but when it came to Prince Arel, they are a loss. The council expressed their worries about the prince possessing a powerful weapon such as the massive crossbow. The king is disappointed that his council would even think that way. He tells them that the prince had already promised to leave the management of the crossbow to the palace. As for his reward, he wants to give him the title of a duke. But surprisingly, all the prince wants was just the surrounding lands of Fahilia, which was also barren and useless. The prince knows that some people might laugh at him for choosing those useless lands as a reward, but he doesn't care. He notices that the temperature is a bit dry, so he orders Dia to adjust it. It is time to organize his rewards. Apart from the lands, he also gets some gold coins. He's not short on money, so he decides to set them aside for his soldiers' compensation and relief funds. Then there is the slaves. He sees them as less of a reward and more of a decision to send them to Fahilia. The prisoners who weren't ransomed became official slaves of the kingdom, but no one knew what to do with the sudden increase in slaves, so Prince Arel decided to take half of them in, since he now had the space and the resources. The war might have been a hassle, but he got what he wanted in the end. His grand plan is coming together piece by piece. Those nobles who laughed at him should just wait. Back at the kingdom of Damaniel, the king is frustrated and curses the Arnesians. They wanted 2 million gold coins as war reparations, an amount his kingdom could never afford. Paying it off would put Damaniel in a dire financial state for decades to come. His right hand, who had introduced the whole idea of the war in the first place, blames himself. The king ignores him and tells him to go draft a business plan. Punishing him now would only throw the administration into chaos. The nobles, however, who supported the war, would receive no allowances until the compensation is fully paid. At the Archduchy of Chejapen, the Duke receives word that he is being blamed and asked to take responsibility for this mess, which he had expected. In fact, he reckons they are even lucky it ended this way. His problem now are the reparations. His advisor thinks that the Arnesian kingdom is truly a terrifying place, as it brought down the once revered war hero Duke to his knees. He then blames it all on the Mirman Empire and calls them all murderers for sacrificing their citizens and then surrendering, claiming that it was all a misunderstanding. Meanwhile, it's a whole lot of chaos at the Mirman Emperor's palace as citizens riot fiercely outside. His servant suggests that he punishes them, but the emperor cannot. He had anticipated this from the moment they sent their surrender letter. He blames himself for everything and takes full responsibility. Soon, he steps down from the throne and his eldest son succeeds him. The three-territory alliance needs some time to recover from this war. Meanwhile, there's a random lady, holding a cute little lizard, and it's time for her to leave. In a flashback, we see the young life of the second princess of Arnesia, now the personal knight of Prince Arel, Kania. She wonders if a life lived exactly as planned is truly a happy one. She believed that her life back home was always so stiff and strict. She couldn't stand all the rules that came with being royal, but she couldn't complain because she knew she was privileged. One day, while she was practicing her swordsmanship, she wished she was as free as the sword she held in her hand. That was when her long-standing desire began. Fast forward to the present, Kania is slightly disturbed. The prince senses that she is being asked to return to the palace and she confirms it. Both her parents sent her letters to return home. Prince Arel says that she must have stood out too much at the battle. He reckons that the nobles had not believed her strength as a swordmaster until they saw it for themselves in battle. Now those cowards had started to fear that Kania's abilities are too powerful to leave her in a distant territory. It isn't a light matter, for all swordmasters are directly tied to the kingdom. Kania asks her brother if he wants her to go too, and the prince decides to be honest with her. He tells her that she knows more than anyone that she cannot live her life here forever. She was able to grow because of his teaching, but if she chose to remain by his side forever, she'd never grow further. He tells her to go and build her own life and strive to gain recognition, whatever it takes. She has to learn how to be independent as an adult. The princess then tells him that it's hard to take him seriously when he is always lazing about. This catches the prince off guard. He tells her to take some time to think about it. As she walks down the hall, Kania remembers how she was before she decided to give up everything and work for the prince. She was betrothed to a handsome young man, and when she got his picture, she tore it to pieces. She hated the idea of entering a political marriage just because she was a princess that had come of age. She then remembered that the prince had also been sent to a faraway territory. She concludes that his fate was much worse than her own. So on her way to comfort him, she overhears him shouting for joy. She admired him for transforming his fate into an opportunity instead of just accepting it. She decided then and there that she'd follow Arel, watch him closely, and then follow his example. Kania had forgotten that that was the reason she was with him in the first place. Back to the present. Kania makes the decision to stop relying on her brother's abilities. The next morning she barges into his office, breaking the front door, and announces that she has made up her mind to go back to the palace. The prince agrees in tears. What did his front door ever do to her? So Kania prepares and is leaving the palace. The prince reveals that even if she hadn't agreed to go back, he had already made preparations for her to get recognized either way. Kania wonders if she should beat the other two swordmasters in the kingdom, and the prince is surprised at her ambition. He just warns her not to go breaking stuff, as the bill will be on her head, not his anymore. She promises to keep that in mind. The prince will miss her and will always be cheering for her. After the farewell, it is time to get back to work. Fahilia is as peaceful as ever, and he finds out that some youths are getting married. He then wonders if he should get a match for Frey as well. He reckons that with his wealth increasing, maybe it's time for him to start finance. He's still not interested in politics or power but in money, for money controls the world. He fantasizes that to fulfill his plans he will need to build his finances. He comes up with the idea of establishing a bank and stabilizing the currency. He reckons that if he hadn't started this, another person would have sooner or later. He decides to dominate the finance sector and solidify Fahilia's power. He would recruit some talent and experts to serve as figureheads, which is another way of saying that he wants to delegate the work to someone else and do nothing. As usual, as he is thinking of who to hire, he gets a call from his mother. She asks how he's faring and he replies positively. Then she inquires about his age, and that question sends cold shivers down his spine, as he could already guess what was coming next. His mom is suggesting he find a fiancé. He is dumbfounded. Asha congratulates him. Dick congratulates him. Sena expresses how this is a happy event, and he replies with all their happy wishes with a moody, shaky, thanks. Back at the call, his mom had told him to come back and meet with the candidates the king, and she had carefully chosen for him, but he still wants to play around. He reckons that the age of consent in this era is way too early. He misses Kanya, only now realizing how she felt when she ran away from home. Asha asks about his fiancé, and he reveals that it hadn't been decided yet. They had sent him 10 candidates to choose from, perhaps out of respect. That is why he called them. He needs them to join him in picking out the finalists. Unlike other times when he had to select people, he couldn't look into the minds of the candidates, as they are not physically present. But to his dismay, none of them gave decisive opinions, even Asha, who was a noble. Apparently, she was never involved in engagement matters because of her family's decline, and Sena's people just pick up whoever they like. As for Dia, she strongly believes that he needed someone perfect in every way, but her standards are way too high. They decide to just put their heads together and try their best. Sena suggests one person, but the prince had done some investigating and found out she was being forced. The next suggestion was ruled out because of a huge gap in age. They kept going on like that until they finally landed on one. He returns to the palace with his choice, and his mom looks quite excited about it. The truth was that he had just chosen a lady from a quiet family that cannot cause him any problems. His mom says that his father is quite pleased with the enthusiasm he showed towards the matter. And our boy decides then not to ever tell his father that he was not really interested. His mom suggested they go meet her. At the meeting location, Saria is with Count Tuan. She is the second daughter of the Cowanst family. Although they aren't loaded, they have a good reputation. They greet and get comfortable, making small talk. The prince notices that she is beautiful both inside and out. But that's the problem. The prince worries that she's way too nice and perfect for someone like him, who has wild ideas and freaky plots on a random day. He decides on that note that she's not right for him, and then they part ways on good terms. The issue now is that his mother seems to like that girl, and his father had approved of her. He refuses to put her mom in a tight spot, but his mom already notices and confronts him head-on about it. He's shocked that she noticed, but she tells him not to worry, as his decision would be respected on the matter. His father also agreed to it, which was why the prince was made to choose in the first place. He had learned from what happened with Kanya that forcing marriage would only lead to embarrassing accidents. He politely declines the offer of marriage. For now, our MC really wants nothing to do with marriage. He hasn't even developed coke yet. That must surely come first. As he was still deep in thought, he notices someone, or something, spying on him from the bushes. As he waits to get a closer look, a lizard jumps out and lands on his face. It's not just any lizard though, but a salamander, a fire spirit. The prince knows that nobody in the kingdom has enough spirit affinity to summon a spirit and is confused, until the summoner shows up. She asks him to hand the lizard over to her, and the prince realizes that she is Paina Amrit Janil, the princess of the Mirman Empire that came to the kingdom as a hostage. But under the cover of studying abroad, the prince never imagined they'd actually meet and realized she didn't know who he was. The lady told him to call her anything, as she didn't care for formalities, especially now that she was abroad. He gave her the lizard, as he made his observation of her laid-back personality. As she turns to leave, he asks her if it was a spirit, and she turns into full panic mode, trying desperately to deny it. But all her efforts are thrown in the trash when the lizard breathes fire. She then pins our MC to the ground and tries to bribe him to keep quiet. This lady really is a handful. Oh dear. The prince is pinned to the ground, with a strange lady on top of him trying to bribe him. He had never even been bribed normally before. He agrees not to tell anyone. Pina is still not convinced, but the prince assures her that she could always feign ignorance if he ever caused a commotion, and there was nothing in it for him anyways. He then yells at her not to go around summoning it if she doesn't want people finding out, but she pleads that she couldn't control it, so it just pops out whenever it wants. It makes sense to the prince because the relationship isn't based on authority, but on mutual consultation. The spirit was simply following her because of her high affinity. The prince tries to teach her a tip. He tells her to command the spirit with a clear purpose, like a puppy. The girl is confused but does it anyway, and to her surprise it does exactly as she says. The prince tells her that he read it in a book, and the girl appreciates him, then asks his name. The prince is disappointed at how late in their interaction she asks. He then properly introduces himself. He was going to forge a name but later changed his mind. He is curious as to how she'd react to one of the people who made her a hostage, but she acted so plainly it shocks the prince. He doesn't even think she realizes that he's a member of the royal family, which makes him realize that she's not interested in politics. She then asks if she can ask him more questions about spirits, but he reveals that he actually stayed in the countryside. She immediately realizes that they kicked him out, and this irritates him as she saw through his situation immediately. He tells her to ask the people staying at the concubine palace if she ever needed to find him, but deep down, he really doesn't want her to. At least at that time he didn't. At some other place, a dark magician is seen hovering over the battlefield with corpses lying everywhere. He does shady magic that seems to be feeding off the negative emotions left behind by the dead, and is grateful for this unfortunate event and the idiot who caused the war. Meanwhile, back to our prince. He had returned home, and now he had postponed his engagement. He was ready to start his bank. He teleports to an establishment with Asha and Dia, where Hazel Carrot, a patriarch, greets them. He was the brother of Haya, the girl that had fallen for Asha's younger brother Aret. The prince had come there for a very important reason. He wants to do business with the Carrot family. Hazel is confused and points out that the prince already had a store, but the prince tells him that this one would be on a much bigger scale. He wants to establish a bank and introduce a new currency, as the current one had way too many loopholes. He had already run this idea by the king, and the new currency would be irreplaceable dwarven-made coins. Hazel understands the prince but questions his decision to choose him. The prince tells him that he cannot run it by himself and was simply looking for talent. In other words, he wanted him to be the president of his bank. Hazel is still unsure as to how he'd be able to manage all the finances going through the country, but the prince tells him that he will benefit well from it. Hazel is still unsure, and the prince admires his uncertainty, as it shows that he is not foolish and blinded by greed. Hazel has a good personality and a reputation for making good investments. The prince assures him that he'll make it happen no matter what. Some merchants are bound to resist, but it won't be impossible. He then whispers to him that he has the most gold in the country right now. So, he insisted that he join him in solidifying the economy of the country. Hazel assures the prince that his plan will definitely succeed. Still, he is confused as to why the prince wants to do this when he is already very rich. Our MC then reveals to the man that he doesn't just want more money. Rather, he wants to control the flow of money and convert his territory into a flourishing city. Then shove it in those nobles' faces. Building a city is not easy, and for that, he needs to establish a bank, as it is one of the cornerstones of a city. Hazel realizes that the bank is just a small step to a much bigger realistic goal that other lords would have laughed at. It moves him greatly, and he accepts the prince's proposal with honor. Then they shake on it. As they turn to leave, Hazel inquires about the prince's plan with the cost after opening the bank. He offers to have people look into it, but the prince tells him not to worry, as negotiations would come sooner or later. At Sena's hometown, at the southern end of the Arnesian kingdom, the prince, his guard Sena, and magician Dia are there in person, as Sena's people, who were mercenaries, had previously rejected his job offer to become bodyguards for his new bank. As they approach the village, Dia suddenly halts and blocks the prince's path. She senses that they're being watched and uses a spell to locate and electrocute the spies. Sena seems to recognize the spies as people from her village. She explains that it must have been a misunderstanding, and politely excuses herself to clear things up. She does so using her native language, which seems rather violent, beating them to a pulp as she explains the situation. Soon they were clear to pass. The name of the village is Nachapanil, and the village chief, Agbena, who is also Sena's grandpa, apologizes and welcomes them. Agbena tells them that he still couldn't accept the prince's offer, and the prince notices that he's unyielding. Dia then reveals to the prince privately that the atmosphere had changed from the last time she was here. Apparently, she had stopped by the village before when she had just come out of the magic tower. She tells the prince that the villagers seem very wary of the outskirts of the village. The prince tells the chief that there is obviously a problem, and he should let him help them. The chief refuses to trouble the prince with their problems, but the prince says that it should be his decision to help or not. Reluctantly, the chief reveals the village's major problem to the prince: the undead. They had suddenly started popping up at the village outskirts, about 1,000 of them. The prince is shocked as to why this was not discussed at the palace. He then inquires after the lord of the territory. Apparently the lord was recently changed. He is the cousin of Count Quentil. The chief reveals that the reason why the matter was hidden is because the village is the only one being affected. The prince is still confused, so the chief explains further in a flashback. Count Quentil had almost wiped away their village because they had failed to pay taxes that year as a result of a bad harvest. It was his son, Sena's father, who strongly fought to keep this from happening. Unfortunately, he was accused by the count, interrogated, and probably killed as a result. But the count was also punished for embezzling funds, so he was removed and his cousin replaced him 2 years ago. The prince reckons that the new lord must be intentionally ignoring the village infestation as some sort of revenge for his cousin. He offers to resolve the issue with the lord by himself, but the chief refuses and reveals that they were planning on leaving the territory soon anyway. The chief reveals that his tribe has moved many times before in the past, so this is no problem. The lord is one thing, but the undead are the major issue. They had tried to endure, but they just couldn't any longer. The prince tells him that trying to move now will be very difficult and will only create more problems. But the villagers don't have any other plausible choice, that is, until our protagonist offers to help them solve the problem of the undead. The chief is shocked. There are over 1,000 of them. The prince says he can do it, he just needs their cooperation. He tells him to weigh his options very carefully. If they move, there is no real guarantee of a stable income, but if they agree to him, not only will he eradicate their undead problems, but he'll also buy their labor at a good price. The chief requests some time to think it over. The reason why the villagers were so wary is because recently an outsider who had entered their village became undead. The prince notices that most of the villagers have fighting power equivalent to that of an active knight. He also notices that they are naturally prone to awakening auras. He decides that it would be a waste to leave them under that stupid lord, while he's evilly plotting on how to use them. Innocent Sena thinks he's a kind person. After much consideration, the chief finally accepts his proposal, but only on the sole condition that he eradicates all the undead, which our protagonist, who was a pro in his previous lives, plans to do. The undead are wandering in the forest near the village, and the prince and his guards attack and kill one of them. The prince notices that there's no mage in charge of them, and wonders who would have been foolish enough to just create them and dump them there. Sena asks if they're going to just deal with them one by one, but the prince thinks that would be too inefficient. He decides to just gather them up and cremate them all at once. Dia is amazed. The easiest way would have been to use holy water, but that's way too expensive and rare in their kingdom. They don't need that though, when they have a 6th-class magician like Dia. The important thing is to gather the dead, so the prince decides to use himself and Sena as bait. They camp right there in plain sight. Nothing could be more appetizing to the undead than fresh human flesh delivered to them on a silver platter. Sena is worried, but our MC is as nonchalant as ever. She complains that it's too dangerous for the prince to be out here at night. But the prince argues that he needs to do this himself. He needs the chief to trust him. Apart from that, he knows that if Sena's people had left, she would have surely followed them, and he was not ready to lose her just yet. She relaxes a bit, and just then they start showing the undead. Sena quickly grabs the prince's hand and carrying him on her back, she starts running, zipping through the forest like a cheetah. This is definitely scary because the dead are hot on their heels, like a freaky horror movie. He feels like he's in a game of tag, and Sena begs him to stop enjoying it. Once a lot had gathered, the prince signals Dia, who had been hiding in the air all this while, and she casts a fire spell, fire wall, on them that turns them into stinky ashes in seconds flat. The prince notices that the caster must not have finished his experiment, as the undead had no defensive spells at all. The magic had attracted more of the undead, and the prince tells Sena that they may have to repeat this a few more times. She might have to keep running till morning. Sena is completely exhausted. Running all night with someone on her back was difficult even for a knight. Our MC praises his companions. They had completely air-fried the entire undead army. Dia reports that she couldn't find any other traces of mana. The undead had traces of undead mana, and they were wearing armor, not civilian clothes. Our boy needs to investigate further on this matter. Back to the village they all go. The villagers all look like they could use a barf bag. The prince and his companions have been running around dead corpses all night, so they stunk. After a fresh bath, Dia shows the chief proof that the prince kept his promise. It is now time to talk business. The chief hadn't expected it to go so fast, but our boy was quite an impatient fellow. He promises to also take care of that dumb lord, and the chief is speechless. Our MC suggests that he thanks him by considering his previous request. All our boy wants are tough bodyguards that can help him guard his future bank. He also pays handsomely well. The chief agrees and the contract is set. Finally, they even had to defeat a whole army of undead, just for this one bank. There's one last thing left to do. At the palace in the conference room, our protagonist, looking fresh as ever, clearly states his plans to a room full of nobles about his bank. One of them wonders why he can't just store the money in like a mansion or something, but the prince tells him that it won't be so safe. He makes reference to what happened with the concubine, a tragic incident our scheming little devil of an MC obviously had something to do with, but is now being used as a case study to defend his point. What a menace. The reasoning was to create an untouchable safe bank, guarded with knight-level security, not just to store money, but to lend money to capable people. That way they could charge interest. A noble then inquired about the consequences of not paying, and our prince shows him a devilish smile. What did he think was going to happen? The bank would be established to organize the flow of wealth in the kingdom, and then a new currency would replace gold coins. The nobles aren't really thrilled with the whole currency idea, but our boy had anticipated this. He then tells them that the current market system and currency were basically trash, being mixed with counterfeit and foreign gold. He promises to bear the costs and give the currency sufficient value. At the end of his presentation, most of the nobles agreed to his cause. He's so happy that he had decided to go around before the conference and bribed. No, politely persuaded them to his side using a few tricks. Finally, everything is ready, and they can start the construction. After the conference, two shady-looking nobles are having a discussion. Count Cain can't let the prince do this. But Dezel, the other noble, reminds him of the prince's new status as duke. Cain tries to argue, but Dezel tells him that if anything happened, he'd be the one in trouble. After hiding 1,000 undead, he really shouldn't bring his mistakes here. Cain tries to explain that, but Dezel's already gone. And just like that, in less than a month, our bank is completed. It is also located on the best land in the capital, since the plan is to establish branches all over. Word is spreading around the streets, and positive rumors are flying around about the bank. In Diesel's mansion, he's speaking with another noble about the bank. He'd still trust his safe more than the bank anytime, any day. The noble then reveals that there had been recent attacks from thieves on carriages, but he already knew all too well about that. Well, it turns out they had also tried to attack a carriage carrying important banknotes. Too bad for them that mercenary bodyguards who taught them a painful lesson were present. Dezel couldn't believe that the bank bodyguards were powerful aura users. Cain was behind this and was punished for it, alongside hiding the presence of undead. The bull-headed Dezel started to seriously reconsider his financial decisions and so-called safe. A whole new era has begun to brew in the Ernesia Kingdom's financial sector. Sweet. Arel and his father are discussing the city he plans to build in Fahilia. The king is concerned though. He worries that Arel may not be able to maintain it. That's if he finds a way to even complete it. The prince understands where his dad is coming from. This decision could make or break a barren land that had barely been saved. People might still not visit barren lands even after they have been developed. His dad then pulls him closer and reveals that he had actually been planning to get him out of there in a few years. Our protagonist interprets this as his dad's care for him, but he still declines his offer. He had already started to build his paradise of a chilled life. He'd take that over hanging out with some dumb nobles any day. He goes on to assure his father that his city would be extraordinary, and begs for his trust. After some thought, the king finally concedes and grants him his permission. We have a happy prince. With that, the construction of his city commences immediately. He speaks to his citizens and asks for their understanding. Due to the reputation of his technology, talented craftsmen already come flocking to him, ready to build a proper residential area where people could live with peace of mind. They need a wall first because of the ferocious monsters, although the citizens are already used to it. But for the sake of citizens from other places, this is important. Safety first. And our MC has just the right stone material for the wall, high quality of course, and plenty of it. Other lords had abandoned the material because they lacked the technology to mine it, so it was gifted to the prince after the war. Maybe he'd have his very own statue soon. Our protagonist is not satisfied with just building a city. He reveals that he actually wants to build a tourist destination, like a factory with so many things to offer. He doesn't want to just live his life and get rich. He wants to enjoy himself while doing it. But then again, one step at a time, it's not time for that yet. The prince is tired. He had finished reviewing everything and could now leave the rest to the craftsman. He clicked a button, and boom, a portal appeared. He hopped in, and it reveals a secret bunker, a place where he could slack off. A man cave of some sort. It isn't in the castle because he needed some privacy. Out of excitement, he had added so many things that the room could now be used as an escape bunker in case of a siege battle. He can now relax and laze about and thinks maybe he should build one with a hot spring next time. But this isn't good enough for him, as he still feels extremely bored. He wants something colorful, like comics, and thinks maybe he should start painting soon. He decides to go ahead and do it, but his relaxation is cut short when an urgent message from the palace arrives. At another place, a dark mage is casting a shady spell. He finally has enough negative human emotions to pull it off. He curses the bastards who look down on his kind as he releases the spell that wakes up the undead and sends them towards the kingdom. A night watch soldier sees them from afar and immediately alerts the superiors. The prince sits with dismay as he reads the letter from the palace. A large number of undead has appeared on the northeastern and southern borders, over thousands of them. Damn it. Just as he was starting to relax. Apparently, all the dead people from the war had been turned undead, as the number matched the number of casualties. Dia points out that the earlier attack must have been just his training. She obviously hates dark mages, but it's too early to determine who was really behind this. The army of undead had split and was trying to cross the border of the kingdom and the Three Territory Alliance. Sienna suggests sending troops, but the prince isn't sure, as the royal palace hadn't given any orders yet. Our boy is vexed. As this news had stopped his construction and trade, he orders his personal guards to tighten security and tells them not to worry. Our scheming protagonist is about to turn this whole ordeal into an opportunity to make profits. At the kingdom's border fortress, the undead had already started climbing the walls. The kingdom's defenses are at work, trying to hold them off until they have received further instructions from the castle. At the royal castle, the king orders an evacuation for residents near the border. He's glad that his son had warned him. If not, things might have been much worse. One of his council members suggests that they request help from the Holy Kingdom. Zelnian. The Holy Kingdom was a country that was best at dealing with evil techniques like these. But the king wasn't sure whether they'd help him. The Holy Kingdom had the strict belief and only recognized the existence of humans. Other creatures were seen as monsters, but the Kingdom of Arnesia welcomed people of all races, including dwarves and elves. This created a silent conflict between the nations. The king was not sure what conditions they'd impose for their help. An elf also agreed with him, saying that they might try to force the kingdom to start discriminating or banishing other races. He decides to leave, asking for their help as a last resort. Just then, a letter from our boy arrives. There's no need for the Holy Kingdom's help after all when they have a genius on their side. Prince Arel to the rescue once more. Meanwhile, at the Mirman Kingdom, it is absolute chaos as the undead had already broken through and had driven the villagers living at the border to seek refuge at the palace. The new king was highly distressed and didn't know what to do. After his father had stepped down, he still had to try and regain the citizens' trust that was lost during the war. And now this was happening. He couldn't even get help from his allies. He had no choice but to resort to requesting help from the Holy Kingdom and accepting their conditions, whatever they were. He knows that this would mean they can interfere with his empire's affairs in the future, but he can't worry about that right now. The only reason why the Holy Kingdom could exact this level of influence in the first place is because they are the only people who made the very rare and irreplaceable holy water that could dispel evil like the undead very easily. Because of this, in return for their help, they'd charge expensively or impose ridiculous conditions on other countries. At the Daimonial Kingdom, they hear that the Mirman Empire had already asked the Holy Kingdom for help. The king worries that because of the influence of the Arnesian Kingdom and the bad blood they have with the Holy Kingdom, they too might not be able to do the same. He is confused as to why the Arnesian Kingdom had not made any move yet. He doesn't dare believe that they have already found a solution. A letter then interrupts his thoughts. To his amazement, the Kingdom of Arnesia is offering to give him the same help as the Holy Kingdom, but at a much cheaper price. It is revealed that our protagonist had already found a way to replicate the precious and rare holy water that was causing all this fuss. With the help of his alchemist not so long ago, our MC has done it again. The prince remembers that in his 45th or 46th life, he had helped a woman he acknowledged to mass-produce holy water, and thanks to that experience, he can now artificially create holy water. The only downside is that it is less effective than real holy water, as you need much more to cleanse an undead, but the upside is that he can create as much as he wants, and it is as cheap to produce as water. So, of course, he mass-produced it sometime before the undead invasion began. Now the kingdom uses it to fight off the undead, and it is doing its job very well. They send letters to other affected regions, aka the Three Territory Alliance and some others, and the Holy Kingdom as well, offering help regardless of past grievances. Of course, some idiots don't believe it, like the Mirman Empire, so the kingdom sends another letter saying that the third prince is going to explain its efficiency soon enough. Our boy is pleasantly surprised at how many people want to see him now. Daya is concerned that he might be putting his private safe life at risk, and thinks there's something else behind her master's plan, and she was right. Turns out our protagonist wasn't doing this for any greater good. Instead, he wants whole nations to be indebted to him. He wants to drill the fear of his power into their minds. And lastly, money, of course. Yep, he wants their money in bulk.